thank Red Cloud for giving us the opportunity to present to you what the update's been at Paramount, what we're working on, and where we see things moving forward. So Paramount Gold Nevada is actually Paramount 2, if you will. We had a predecessor company that was called Paramount Gold and Silver, and that was sold to Core Mining back in 2015. And at that time, we spun out Paramount Gold Nevada, named such because we own the Sleeper property in Nevada, which has a pretty storied past, which I'll get to. But at that time, when we were spun out, the gold price was about $1,200, $1,250, and Sleeper is a large, low-grade deposit in Nevada, so it wasn't economic at those prices. So the following year, in 2016, we acquired a company called Calico Resources. And Calico owned the Grassy Mountain project in eastern Oregon, and what attracted us to that project was that there's a high-grade core there. There's 1 million ounces, which we have now. And we understood that we were taking on the challenge of being the very first project ever to go through the permitting regime in Oregon, but I'm happy to report that we have made significant progress there, and that's what I'll be sharing with you moving forward. If there is really one thing I want you to take away from this presentation today, it's that there's been a seismic shift, in my perspective, in the risk profile of this company from what we had over the past number of years, really up until about a month ago. So just corporately, so you understand, we are a U.S.-listed company only. We're on the NYSE American, as Taylor mentioned, PZG. The assets are all in the U.S., though our management and board are spread out between the U.S. and Canada and Chile, as a matter of fact. So between those two assets, Sleeper in Nevada and Grassy Mountain in Oregon, we do have a total of 4 million ounces of gold resources. We have a June year end, so these are pretty fresh financials, so we will be filing our Q1 at the end of this week as well. And I do like to flag on our major shareholder list a couple of names who you might recognize. Seabridge Gold has been a tremendous supporter of ours. In fact, I have good board representation from the Seabridge camp. And Ausenco became a shareholder by virtue of having led our feasibility study, and at that time they opted to take stock instead of cash in the company for the work they did. So the progress on the permitting front that I want to bring your attention to, because it really is a huge deal for the company, and this is something that there's been many, many years of work that has brought us to this point. So just earlier this week, we announced that we received something called the Notice to Proceed from the state of Oregon. Really what this is the culmination of close to 2 years of review from our latest application to build and operate Grassy. So post an almost 2-year review period, they finally came out in October and hence issued to us this notice earlier this week that says, yes, this application is fully baked for everything the agencies are going to need to start the permitting process, but that also commits the agencies to a 1-year timeline to issue final permits. And this has never been done before in the state, so it really was a Herculean effort, and I think our team deserves a lot of kudos for getting us to that point. For Paramount specifically, this will have a couple of impacts. Obviously, the culmination of that work is a huge reward for us. But as this has been a particularly challenging time for all mining companies of a certain size to be able to access funding and keep operating consistently, it also has significance for us in terms of our financial picture moving forward. So essentially what that means is that back in March, we announced a non-binding term sheet with Sprott Streaming and Royalty for a $15 million royalty convertible note. So the structure of this is it will start as a convert in Paramount, and then once we're in operation at Sprott's option, which they will exercise, they'll convert this into a royalty on Grassy. And, you know, in this type of environment for a company of a market cap about 18, 19 million US, to be able to access 15 million is pretty extraordinary. So we're in the process now of working through the definitive documentation for this deal. We're hoping that we're on track to close it possibly by the end of this month, but certainly by the end of this year. And then you'll see another big shift in the company's profile in that the use of proceeds from that funding will allow us to completely eliminate the rest of the debt that we have on our balance sheet and to have the capital to be able to move us forward until we get these final permits in hand. We will have an option to buy back 50% of this royalty down the road, which certainly, given a positive gold price environment, is something that I would expect would be exercised. So conditioned to the Sprott funding was also the receipt of this notice to proceed. So once we do get that deal signed and sealed, that will be the trigger for us to be able to receive the funds, and that trigger has already occurred. So we'll spend a little time on Oregon because, again, this is the first project that will ever be moving into production. So this has been a notable event, not just for the company, but for the state as well, because there are a number of other deposits in the state, and this has really been their guinea pig for permitting. I think what has made it possible for us to get this far is partially that we are all the way on the eastern border with Idaho. So, most of us who haven't spent a lot of time in Oregon probably are more familiar with Portland, Antifa, a lot of, sort of more environmentally left-leaning philosophies, let's say, in that part of the state that would probably make it impossible or virtually impossible to ever build a mine there. But we are on the eastern border with Idaho. We're in an area that is not very densely populated. It also happens to lean very Republican, and there is a dire need to see job creation in this part of the state. So we're in a county called Malheur, which, if you speak French, is actually Malheur. And it's a county where you'll see an average median household income of about $45,000, whereas the jobs that we'll be creating, about 100 full-time jobs, will pay somewhere between $90,000 and $100,000 a year. So it's really a game changer, and that's in addition to about 300 construction jobs once we get the go-ahead to actually build. So if you see here the access road to Grassy, we're in a very remote location in spite of being geographically close to population centers, which is also helpful because you can't see or hear anything from the mine site around anywhere else. And it also looks very familiar to Nevada if any of you have been there, which I'm sure a number of you have. The remoteness of this project and the job creation is also what has led us to have a tremendous amount of political support to see this project move forward. So certainly at the county level, but at the state level as well, we have been grateful to have tremendous support from the local senators and representatives who understand that they don't have a lot of ways to help economic stimulus in Eastern Oregon, so they've been very supportive of this project. So the project that we're building here, I'd mentioned earlier that we have a total of 1 million ounces, but in spite of that, we are only targeting a small, high-grade underground core. And that was a decision that was taken because of our understanding of the political and social environment of the very first project moving through this permitting regime. We didn't feel that an open pit would have been successful, and I do believe that that was the right call today. So the small underground mine that we are building is just under 400,000 ounces, 6.8 grams per ton. It'll be a very small milling operation, 750 tons a day, and will generate about 50,000 ounces of gold equivalent annually for an initial mine life of 8 years. I would say we have a number of opportunities to see that mine life extend beyond 8 years, and what I would describe as a pretty reasonable capex of $140 million. So based on our study metrics, and this is all I'm going to show you on an after-tax basis, that'll generate about $20 million of free cash flow annually. So we did run the study economics that Ausenco did for us at $17.50, and certainly that yields a great return on an after-tax basis, which will just continue to improve in terms of shortening the payback period and seeing a higher rate of return as we move into a higher gold price environment as well. So this is a picture of Grassy, which actually does a very good job of showing why previous owners of this property envisioned it as an ideal open pit. The lower grade mineralization occurs about 50 meters from surface, that's in the purple. And the high grade that we're building is really in the kind of pinky portion, that's about 150 meters from surface as well. So again, although that could be an option for future growth down the road, this isn't something that we're permitting today. We are only permitting the underground mine, but we do have already line of sight on near mine exploration targets, certainly the potential to drill off more high grade at depth, and an additional property nearby, which I'll show you as well. So just to switch back to the permitting regime in Oregon a little bit, this is, they have statutes, laws in place since the early 90s, but again, they've never rejected a mine. They've simply never had anybody with a project advanced enough to go through their permitting regime. So we really are the guinea pig for this process. They have fixed times that they need to respond to certain parts of our permitting submissions. And it's also a pay-to-play state, meaning that Paramount needs to reimburse the permitting agencies for the work that they do in assessing our permits. And that is also part of the reason why over the last 6 or 7 years, we have been really laser-focused on Grassy and haven't really been able to spend a lot of time or money on the other assets in our portfolio, notably Sleeper. So where we are in this is early October, we received a completeness determination. So this was essentially all of the agencies getting together in a public format and saying, you know what, this application has been fully baked with everything we need after all this time and effort and collaboration with the company. And that led to the notice to proceed that we announced just on Monday. And that's what starts this 1-year clock until final permits get issued. Along the way, though, we will have a couple of other opportunities to see how the agencies are tracking with their process. So in early Q1, we will be getting this environmental evaluation, which is currently being done by Stantec on behalf of the state of Oregon. Then we'll see draft permits released probably in the third quarter, which will include permit conditions. There'll be another public review process, and then final permits should be issued at the end of December of next year. The additional project that I mentioned that we have nearby is called Frost. This is something that we have an option on, which will allow us, if we can go back in and find higher material like Western Mining did back in the 90s, they drilled up to 25 grams a ton, could be an interesting point for us to have additional mine life that could be added by trucking ore from Frost to Grassy. But this is very early days and we're not spending any money on exploration at the moment. So just switching a little bit, the focus here to Nevada. We do own the Sleeper property. Some of you in this room might remember Sleeper. It was really a barn burner of a producer from the mid-'80s to the mid-'90s from a 7 gram per ton open pit heap leach and mill scenario. We do not have 7 gram per ton material left in Nevada, otherwise I wouldn't be talking to you about Oregon. But what we do have is a sizable property. We have about 40,000 acres, largely contiguous. If I can direct your eye to the little yellow blob, that was what produced the 1.7 million ounces. And what we also have is a good starting point of about 3 million ounces already identified, low grade, but certainly grades that could be mineable in Nevada. And so we recently completed an updated resource, an SK 1300 resource, which is something we need to do as a US listed company, basically just verifying and in some cases 30 and 40-year-old data to generate a new resource, which is really quite robust. And we continue to do the ongoing reclamation work at Sleeper. And if I point you to this map, what I like about this is it shows that all of the historic drilling has really centered around the old pit, which isn't surprising given it was 7 grams per ton. But the rest of our land position is largely a white map. So there's certainly opportunity here to do more work at Sleeper, perhaps look at raising the grade profile of the resource. Back in 2021, we had put in a few holes to test a thesis that geologists had about something called the range front fault just east of the pit. Did hit over 1 gram per ton, so certainly I think there would be motivation to go back in, but it's about a capital allocation decision. And while we continue to fund Grassy, where we do believe getting permits on that project will be the biggest value driver we can deliver, Sleeper waits for us to be in a position to do more. Similarly, we do have another exploration project in our portfolio, also in Nevada, called Bald Peak. I won't spend too much time here other than to say it is fully permitted to drill, has a plan of operations on the property. We've shot a number of geophysics and taken surface samples here, and we'd be quite excited to go forward. But again, these are things that can wait for a day when there's a more receptive market, I would say, perhaps, to exploration, given the other things that we have going on. So the bulk of our team, with the exception of myself, have been with the company from Paramount 1 into Paramount 2. I joined about 3.5 years ago. I mentioned on our board we have great support from the Seabridge camp and as well from the geology and engineering disciplines, which helps us along the way. So just as a reminder, a number of the catalysts you'll see from us going forward here. Closing of the Sprott funding, we expect this quarter. We will see the NOI from the BLM side of the permitting equation for Grassy filed into the Federal Registry. We expect that also this quarter. The environmental evaluation coming up in the first quarter, and then the next permitting steps as well. So with that, I'll just leave you with who we are in terms of the numbers. So small market cap at this juncture. We have endeavored to keep our share count low. So you'll see that at about, just under 60 million on a basic basis right now. And trading at, $5 per ounce in the ground, which is part of the reason it makes tough to allocate a lot of capital to grassroots exploration at this time. And I'll leave it at that.